Herman Wouk told a story that was mentioned in the old Reform Siddur in the UK from 1977. They tell a story of the Dubna Magid, the famous preacher of the East European ghetto. Once he was asked by the mighty scholar, the Vilna Gaon, to tell him his faults. The Magid at first declined. When the Gaon pressed him, he at last spoke somewhat like this. "Very well. You are the most pious man of our age. You study day and night, retired from the world, surrounded by the rows of your books, the Holy Ark, and the faces of devout scholars. You have reached high holiness. How have you achieved it? Go down into the marketplace, Gaon, with the rest of the Jews. Endure their work, their strains, their distractions. Mingle in the world. Hear their skepticism and irreligion they hear. Take the blows they take. Submit to the ordinary trials of the ordinary Jew. Let us see then if you will remain the Vilna Gaon." And they say the Gaon broke down and wept. This passage has always resonated very strongly with me, and leads me to the belief, which I guess informs a lot of my rabbinate, that there is rabbinic Judaism and there is folk Judaism, the community's Judaism. And very often those two things are the same, but not always. Sometimes members of the Jewish community who aren't clergy are practicing, observing, and understanding Judaism in a very different way to the way that the rabbis, cantors, and other clergy may understand it. And I believe the role of a rabbi, or one of the roles of a rabbi, is to help bridge the gap between rabbinic Judaism and folk Judaism, to help each inform the other. And this story is relevant because I was in a conversation the other day about Pesach and what is the purpose of Pesach. And how do we respond to the difficulties of the world today, particularly the Israel-Hamas war, so many hostages, Jewish hostages, still missing. How do we bring that into the Seder? Do we at all? And in that conversation I asked, well, what really is the point of the Seder? And people shared, the point of the Seder is unity, is togetherness. And I said, really? That surprises me, because I thought the Seder, to me, was about freedom, in terms of freedom from and freedom to. Freedom from oppression, from slavery, from harm, from othering. Freedom to serve God, however we might understand what that means to serve God. And it was a really interesting moment for me to hear a different perspective on the Seder. That the Seder ultimately is about people coming together to celebrate a story, a narrative. Because the Seder used to be exclusive, deeply exclusive, to the point that according to halakha, according to Jewish law, non-Jews cannot attend a Seder service. It is only for Jews. We in our community, of course, hold that to be nonsensical almost, rude, offensive, because so many of us want to share the story, our narrative. And just because it's our narrative of the Exodus from Egypt doesn't mean it's exclusively ours and no one else can hear it. So the idea of the Seder being an act of unity, an act of coming together, is an interesting modern interpretation, a modern way of looking at it. And yet still for me, I hold that a Seder is also about freedom from and freedom to. Freedom from oppression, freedom to work towards a better society, a Jewish community that is not oppressed, a world where there is no oppression. And you can then turn around and say, yes, that's the unifying message. And I understand that, I do. One of our challenges, as I've said, is how to hold this year's Seder, which seems to be a different kind of Seder, with everything going on. And I found this morning some readings by Alden Sollery. Alden is an extraordinary poet who has been on my podcast, on the Soul Searching podcast, and I do I really recommend you listen to that episode. Alden wrote 2 poems for consideration for the Seder, called Elijah is with the Hostages, and a second one called Miriam is with the Lost. And you can find them on his website, tobendlight.com. And I'm going to share the second one. It's not one that we're going to be reading at the communal Seder, to which we have well over 100 people already booked. But it is one that I share to consider for your Seder, to consider as a reflection, at least for Seder itself. Miriam is with the lost. Miriam, the prophet who brings healing waters, will not visit your Pesach Seder this year. She has taught you all you need to know to bring balm and medicine to the world. The prophet is exhausted, tending hearts in the heavens, comforting the dead, the terrorized, and the murdered. Find hope in your own hands, in deeds of repairing the world and acts of loving kindness. Miriam is not coming to your Seder. The work of healing the world and bringing redemption she has left to us. I find this a really, really moving poem. It resonates, I think, with the theme of freedom too. We have responsibility. The Exodus narrative is not just a narrative of freedom from. We are freed from oppression. We are free from hatred. Because if nothing else, the Jewish community knows historically that has really never been true. Freedom from means freedom to. Freedom to make the world a better place for those who suffer. We learn in Torah repeatedly that we should protect the orphan, the widow, the stranger, because we were slaves in Egypt and because God brought us out from Egypt. So too we must engage in an act of imitatio Dei, of living as God, of behaving as God behaved. Just as God redeemed the oppressed, so too we must redeem the oppressed. And, as I said before, that may well be the unifying message, the universal message behind our particular Exodus narrative. That we have a responsibility to help all who are oppressed, who are suffering at this time. Seder is a challenging time, an invigorating time, an empowering time, a fun time of family gathering together, friends gathering together, or community gathering together to celebrate the fact that we can celebrate our freedom. But then what comes next? What are we free to do? What are we going to do with our freedom? And maybe that is that unifying message. We have a meeting coming up, in fact, at Temple Beth Shalom on Sunday, May the 5th in the morning, where we're going to look at 9 different ways that our community members have expressed interest in helping to make the world a better place, to take the balm, as Eldon Solary describes, to bring balm and medicine to the world. The prophet is exhausted. We have that responsibility. So the morning of Sunday, May the 5th, we're going to look at these 9 different ways that our members have expressed interest in repairing the world and making the world a better place. And we're going to start creating concrete plans for our community for the coming year. This is our responsibility. Our freedom isn't total freedom to do with as we wish. That's not Jewish freedom. It's freedom to make the world a better place. So this Seder, this Pesach, I encourage you to consider not just to celebrate the fact that we are free, but to consider also the next step. Free to do what? And with the words of Eldon Solary and other poets and liturgists in our ears, we reflect, we pause, we think, we consider how we as individuals or how we as a community can help make the world a better place this Pesach and beyond. If you have any questions about how to observe Pesach, about how to run a Seder, anything like that, feel free to be in touch with me, rabbineil@gmail.com. Always here to help. Hopefully we'll see you at our communal Seder or at services. For example, tonight's service is a very special service where all the music has been composed by Fred Mulder. It's extraordinary music. I really encourage you to hear. There's no sermon. The sermon itself is musical. And so I encourage you to join us for that. Our Torah study tomorrow morning is a very adult theme of red and white and certain emissions that come from the body. What does the Torah's real focus on these emissions and rabbinic literature, what did a focus on these emissions tell us? And what can we learn, which is not as simple as you may think? It's actually very complex and I think very wonderful, but it is very adult. So there is an age rating on this one, I think, post B'nai Mitzvah for sure. And of course, join us for our Seder if you are able. Please do be in touch with the community. We put aside a few extra seats just in case you didn't book. Please be in touch with the community by Monday at the very, very latest. If you want to come to our Seder, our communal Seder on second night Pesach. I wish you Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach.